Add excitement to your holidays with Ohio Lottery Holiday Scratch-Offs, including $1 holiday cash and $5 holiday lucky times 10, or Holiday Bonus Millions with a 200 times multiplier and a $2 million top prize. Plus, enjoy second chance drawings where you can win 10 times, 100 times, or 1,000 times the price of your ticket. Scratch-offs make the perfect gift, and best of all, there's no wrapping required. Lottery players are subject to Ohio laws and commission regulations. Play responsibly.
Welcome to Mind Love, episode 219. Today's episode is all about friendship in the age of loneliness.
Perhaps a silver lining of the experience of the last 2 years was that it allowed people to rethink what relationships meant to them. Right? Rethink what it means to be a good friend. Rethink who is a friend in their life and what they want out of friendships. It was kind of this vast, grand permission slip for us to start over a little bit or reinvent what we want out of relationships. And hopefully people understand that because it's been a pretty traumatic, intense experience.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
It's a new day, a new episode, and a new opportunity to subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you always know about new episodes. Plus, it makes you one of my favorite people. Because the more subscribers I have, the more I attract amazing guests to help better serve you. So don't forget to subscribe. Today, I would like to share a review from Marla Broxa. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She says, I really appreciate the preparation that goes into this show. I can tell Melissa brings it for each episode. Some podcasts, it seems like the host isn't present enough to really participate in the conversation, but Melissa makes sure she knows all about the guest while also bringing her personal experience. And she makes me laugh every episode. Thank you so much for taking the time to leave this review. These reviews are honestly my favorite part of having a podcast, so thank you for taking the time. And now let's get to the show. Are you getting lonelier? I'm not trying to rub salt in the wound or anything, but I think we should talk about it. If you're feeling lonelier, ironically, you're not alone in that. If the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's that connections are pretty critical to our happiness. And most of us are not prioritizing them. Actually, as a society, we are lonelier than ever. The average American hasn't made a new friend in the last 5 years. So we can't even fully blame lockdowns because that only accounts for like 40% of that time span. We also tap our phones 2,600 times a day. What the? I'm not even doubting that number, and that's a bad sign. I've shared this before, but I've always felt a spout of loneliness pouring through me throughout my whole life. Maybe it's that I'm an only child, or maybe it's the empath in me that keeps herself protected in some ways. Or maybe it's that I used to deal with hardship by literally moving cities. Or maybe it's because I got pregnant and moved cities when the world shut down, and now I have 30-minute windows in the day to meet up with people, and when the time comes, I realize I still have too much to do. And it's probably a little of all of that. I've done a lot of reflecting on my friendships and connections over the years. Because, to be honest, for a time, even when I was getting text messages to hang out multiple times a day, back in those single days of my 20s, I was still lonely. And I think there's a few reasons for this. First, I think I needed to be my own best friend. And there was a good decade I was being the opposite. It doesn't matter if you have the best friends in the world. If you don't have your own back, you're gonna feel it. Second, there was a time where my friendships were shallow. I don't think we meant to be. And I'm sure I knew a lot of good people, but by nature of where and how we were connecting, like at 4 a.m. doing lines of coke off the counter in the master bathroom of a penthouse in Marina del Rey, too specific? Yes, we were drug-induced sharing every intimate detail of our lives, but still, we could only go so deep because the bond was created by a substance rather than any actual real love of each other, which honestly is really hard to see when you're on all the things. It was a hard pill to swallow, realizing when you no longer wanted to swallow pills, you might not have any of the same friends moving forward. I've also had a lot of phases in my life, and the friends that move through those with me are rare. I have a feeling you can relate because if you're listening to this show, you are probably the type of person that works on themselves. For me, even that can be lonely. With some friends, the more I evolve from the person I was when we met, the more friction that seems to happen between me and those that I'm outgrowing. And it makes sense. People want to hold on to the version of you that they are familiar with. So they can get fearful or sometimes even downright mean when they feel you pulling away. So there's all these reasons and milestones and situations that make friendships even more difficult to keep. But how do we create connections that are lasting and, most importantly, fulfilling? Well, today we're going to talk about practical habits and playful reminders on how to create meaningful connections, make new friends, and deepen your existing relationships. And our guest is Smiley Poswolsky. He's a workplace belonging expert, motivational speaker, and author of a few books, including Friendship in the Age of Loneliness. So 3 key things we will learn are why being more playful is one of the best ways to help your friendships, how to be a better friend, and how to invest in new friendships. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up or text the word morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Smiley Poswolsky to the show. I feel like I can already guess the answer to this, but why do you feel that it's so important to focus on friendship and connection, especially right now?
Yeah, so I think the first kind of main spark for this book was out of my own personal experience, really dealing with loneliness in my 30s. So I am obviously an extroverted person. For those that know me, my nickname is Smiley. So, I go through the world. I have lots of friends. I have, 4,000 Facebook friends, and I'm a pretty outgoing person. And I had this experience in the last recent years, let's say 5+ years, of being someone who's pretty out there socially, at least pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, going to lots of events, meeting lots of people. My living, I make a living by going and speaking at events and meeting people. I literally meet people for a living. And I was going through the experience of, wait, I'm not quite sure who my real friends are. And I feel pretty lonely. If I'm going through this as someone who's a fairly extroverted person whose nickname is Smiley, if I feel lonely, then chances are other people out there probably do. And you start to dig into the research and I realize, whoa, I'm not alone. So the truth is that 1 in 5 people have no close social connections at all, none. We only spend 4% of our time with our friends. And over 60% of Americans are lonely, including 80% of Gen Z. Those are folks that are teenagers and folks that are younger, and 70% of millennials. So this is a real problem. And I wrote the book to kind of bring attention to what I was going through and realizing that, hey, I want to put a magnifying glass on this. I want more people to start talking about it. I want to normalize the conversation a little bit around loneliness.
I know the problem is if you have no one to talk to, who are you going to talk about loneliness with? No, but I feel you on this one. Loneliness is so difficult. I am still trying to figure out if I'm an introvert or an extrovert. It totally depends on my mood. But I definitely lived a long phase of going out all the time. And for me personally, I started to notice that the more connections, and I'm doing air quote connections that I had, so like the people I ended up befriending on Facebook or the ones I'd semi-see on a regular basis, it was almost like the less deep friendships I've had. Now that I have time to, first see the ones that have stood the test of time or just know what I'm looking for in a friendship, they're sticking more. But I also live in a small mountain town where I don't see people very often at all. And so I'm still just trying to figure out, what is the balance for me? What is how hard do I need to feel like I'm trying in order to keep these in-person connections? Because it's like the older we get, with the more things that we have on our plates, we have families and jobs and whatever, the harder it is to actually connect in real life.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what you're saying, really checks out in terms of what a lot of the research shows, is that people are looking not necessarily for more connections, right? Not more followers, more fans, more people that you've met in an event, but deeper connections, right? The quality over the quantity. And I think we can all agree in this day and age, it is hard just to connect with people, but it's much harder to find the deeper connection, the more meaningful connection, the person that actually is going to be at your birthday party, or that you want to be at your birthday party, or that's writing you a letter when you're sick, or showing up for you when you need them. That's who we're looking for. We're not looking for just people that are going to heart emoji, clap hands, fire emoji. Those things are cool, I guess. There's a little dopamine hit, but that's really not what's going to create a deep, nuance, textured relationship. It's much deeper. So I think that less is more in some ways. I think everyone is different, first of all. So no recipe is going to be right for everyone. Introverts, extroverts, ambiverts, however people are. That's not what this is about. It's more about creating the space to think about what you want from friendship, right? I think this is one of those topics where a lot of people just assume, oh, you get to be an adult, you know how to make friends, right? You're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. Friendship, yeah, I know how to do that. Wait a second. Do I? Right? Have I been taught that? Or do I even know what I'm looking for when it comes to friendship? Have I defined what it means to be a good friend in my life in terms of how I'm showing up for others and how I want them to show up for myself? Have I communicated to the people in my life that I care about how much they mean to me? If they've, made a mistake or slighted me in the past, how I want them to do better? Have I had those conversations? In many cases, a lot of adults haven't. And I think that that's really kind of an opportunity for us to go deeper. And a lot of the research shows that if you want to live a healthy, happy, long life, it's not about how much money you make. It's not about how successful you are, your status, right? Or how famous you become, or how many awards you win, or how cool you are on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter or whatever that. It's about the quality of your relationships. It's about, do you have people in your life that you care about? It doesn't have to be 300 of them. It can be 5 of them. But do you have those people in your life? That's what a healthy life is all about. It's simple, but it's hard to actually achieve in practice.
I love the whole making space for finding new friends and defining what you actually want in a friendship. What's interesting to me is that there's so often where, like you said, we just think that we know what we want because we've been doing it forever. But first of all, if we've never gotten intentional about that in the first place, then we probably didn't do a really great job on figuring out what we want in a friend. And second of all, even if we did do that work, how has it changed in the last 10 years? What I'm looking for in a friend right now is completely different than what I was looking in a friend 10 years ago. I was like, do you go out a lot? Do you drink wine? Those are my two things. And now I'm like, how do you know how to be there for a friend? Do you know how to have deep conversations? Do we have things in common? Are you going to love my child? Totally different things.
Right. And people grow. Why shouldn't your friendships grow? You're growing. Why shouldn't your friendships grow? And I think this becomes a challenge for people. They often say, we had this friendship we met in college and we were so close, or in our early 20s, or we lived abroad together, or we both lived in New York City, or fill in the blank place together. And now we're in separate places and we have trouble really connecting. It's yeah, that makes sense. That's okay. It doesn't mean the person is, dead to you, but maybe your friendship evolves and maybe there's other people in your life now that you're closer with. That's okay. It's important to just acknowledge that. And I think, the pandemic is a really good illustration of this. A lot of people that you talk to, perhaps a silver lining of the experience of the last 2 years was that it allowed people to rethink what relationships meant to them, right? Rethink what it means to be a good friend, rethink who is a friend in their life and what they want out of friendships. It was kind of this vast, grand permission slip for everyone to be like, I've been spending a lot of time with this person. We chit chat. They haven't really been around the last few months or the last year. Maybe there's something there, right? Maybe this person isn't serving you anymore, and that's cool. And you kind of got this slip, whereas in 2018, 2019 would have been like a whole big deal. Now it's like, COVID, pandemic, I got new friends, or like I decided who my real friends are. And everyone's kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. So maybe it's this silver lining, a permission slip for us to start over a little bit or reinvent what we want out of relationships. And hopefully people understand that, because it's been a pretty traumatic, intense experience.
I don't know why it took me so long to invest in good bedding. I resisted it for years, but something flipped in me about 3 years ago. And now I'm basically a pillow connoisseur. I've tried them all, and I get weirdly excited about good bedding. Because here's the thing, we spend a third of our lives in bed, and the quality of that time affects literally everything else, which is why I'm so excited to tell you about my latest obsession, Lagoon Sleep Pillows. What sets them apart is their matching system. You take a quick 2-minute quiz about your sleep style and your preferences, and then they match you with your perfect pillow. I was matched with their Otter pillow, and I am so impressed. Lately, I've just needed more support, and this seems to cradle me in all the right places. I'm also low-key obsessed with their travel pillow, which I use for way more than just travel. I actually hug it, use it as leg support, and of course, take it on trips with me. Well, the secret is in their adjustable fill. You can add or remove it to get that perfect alignment for your spine. A study even found that the right supportive pillow can improve sleep quality by 63%. And Lagoon lets you try their matched pillow for 100 nights risk-free. Free returns, no questions asked. Falling asleep has never been easier. I toss and turn less and just wake up feeling refreshed every morning. Go to lagoonsleep.com and take their awesome 2-minute sleep quiz to find your match. Use the code MIND for 15% off your first purchase. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that one, because I've noticed that half of those people didn't choose based on things that would make like, oh, this person's actually loyal, or this person is a really good person that I want in my life. A lot of people made that decision based on, oh, this person's views are exactly like mine, so this is my new friend. This person's views are different than mine, so I'm cutting them off. I've had so many people reach out with that sort of experience, but I will say that the people that have, there's a lot of people, regardless of where they stand on whatever issue. I'm so over talking about those things, but they've realized like there's something missing in my life. And it was really clear as to what it was, because say they were getting that monthly coffee with a friend or seeing people at work or whatever, it was easy to sort of blend out, or it wasn't as easy to see what was missing there. And when everyone was, where a lot of people were forced into isolation, it became very clear what was missing. And so however you decided to choose the friends to keep in your life, whether you did that in an unhealthy or a healthy way, I think the consensus was for a lot of people, we need to figure out how to have in-person contact, because it is very different than just connecting with somebody digitally. I mean, I'm sure most people's like 50th Zoom call that they started to dread. It's like the beginning of the pandemic. I was still drinking back then, so I'd have wine and Zoom calls with my girlfriends, and it was like everything. And by like month 4, I was like, oh my God, I never want to be on Zoom again, except for business.
I hear that. Yeah, I think that one of the things we've learned is just we're social beings, in-person connection. It's not even on the same wavelength as virtual. Now, this isn't to say that there isn't a place for virtual, right? Like we're having a conversation now over Skype. It's a great technology, right? Technology can be amazing, connect people across boundaries, across geographies. There's a place for that. I get to FaceTime with my nephew who lives 3,000 miles away. That's a beautiful thing. And it is not the same as being and sharing space with someone. And that is a fundamental part of a healthy, happy, deep, nuanced life, is having people that are in your space. And I think as we go kind of deeper and deeper into, whatever you want to call the tech future, which, technology is not going anywhere, I believe we need to also kind of increase the amount of human connection in person. So yeah, it's not to say, okay, run from technology, go live in the woods and never use a cell phone. That's pretty unrealistic for most people, probably for almost everyone right now. But it's more like, okay, yeah, you're going to be spending a fair amount of time looking at a screen during the day. How are you balancing that by spending time in person with the people you care about most? And when you're in person, are you actually present with them, right? Are you actually off screen? Are you actually, having a deep conversation, making eye contact, doing something playful, moving your bodies, these type of thing, where you're actually like really living a social life, because we're social beings and we need to, be in share space with other people.
It is funny how making new friends can feel so foreign for an adult. Like it did happen more naturally when you're a child, because it's like, oh yeah, you're in my class, or you live across the hall, or you're my neighbor, and we both go out and drink or whatever it is. And so obviously we're hanging out tonight. Whereas now it's like, okay, can you meet for a coffee date? And then you're like sitting there in the first 10 minutes, you're like, is this person somebody that could actually be in my life? Am I wasting my time right now? And then you're like saying goodbye. It's all awkward. Like, how do you ask for a second date? like, do you make a time right then? It feels so foreign, even though we supposedly have been or should have been doing it our entire lives. But what I love about your book is that you lay out all of these tips for all of the stages of that, like finding new friendship. But I found it interesting that the very first tip that you focus on is just being more playful. How does that help in friendship?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of what you were getting at there is a little bit of just the intention as an adult. Like, you have to have the intention. It's really harder to kind of sit back and be like, I want to make friends. I'm doing it. They'll come to me. It's like, well, not really, I hope that happens. And I hope you have a life where that happens, right? Like you must like always be at the coolest coffee shop and you wear such cool clothes that people are just like, oh, I got to talk to this person, right? You're just like, have this aura around you where people are like, I'm just going to be friends with this person. Like, good luck. That could happen. Or you put yourself out there and make it happen. And I think one of the ways to do that is to be a little bit more playful. And I just want to recognize that this is a little bit harder for people that perhaps are more introverted or have trouble in social situations. I think it's important to name that. But when I say playful, I mean more being yourself. Right? When you have that authenticity and you're leading with who you are and you're vulnerable with who you are, it gives people permission to do the same. And there's a lot of research that shows, when people embrace play, they're more creative. They have that kind of inner child. Remember when you were a kid, like your job was just to play, at recess. Like you couldn't make mistakes. It's just go play, go run around, do whatever you want. You're like, all right, I guess I'll draw here, or I'll sing this song, or I'll throw this ball, or I'll go jump on this or climb this tree. Like you can't go wrong. But as you're an adult, it's like, what should I do? Am I doing it right? Oh my God, they're going to make fun of me. Like, what's going to happen? Like, what do they think of me? It's like when you're a kid, you don't care about that. So I think play brings out this kind of permission slip of like, you can do whatever, you do you. Like, rock what you got. Like, wear what you want to wear. Ask whatever question you want to ask. Like, lead with who you are. And that, I think, allows people to meet you where you are and kind of creates a container for friendship. It's like kind of saying like you're throwing out your olive branch and saying like, hey, like I'm going to show you that you can be who you are because I'm being who I am. Like I'm creating that safety for you, that container of like, it's okay. Right. And I think that draws people in a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. My husband and I are super playful people. And it was funny because we were living in New York for a while, and there's a lot of walking when you live in New York. and we'd always walk by these little parks. And well, my husband is a monkey. He like does calisthenics, does like the human flag. Like he used to go down, we lived in Santa Monica for quite a while, and there's like a big adult playground at the beach. And that was his workout gym that he'd go to every single day. So we'd walk in New York though, and he'd see a playground and he'd be like, I just want to go on those monkey bars and like mess around. And almost all of them were like, cannot enter without a child, which now that we have an 11-month-old, I totally get it. But he was so bummed all the time. He's like, oh, they won't let me in again. And so now he's probably said like 30 times since we've had our baby, I'm just so excited that we have a baby because now I can go to the playgrounds in New York. And I'm like, we're not even in New York anymore.
treating life a little bit like a playground. I mean, I think, and when I say play, it doesn't mean like you have to climb or be jumping up and down and like playing a game, right? It just means like you have that kind of energy of creativity, of excitement, of possibility, of potential that you're saying yes, right? Like the improv kind of yes and approach versus like, these are the rules, don't do that, or can't go in there. Don't climb. Don't say that. Sit in the corner. Cross your arms. Like wait until your turn. Like that attitude isn't very healthy for life or to make new friends. Like no one wants to make a new friend that's just telling them about everything they can't do.
Yeah, I actually made a commitment a long time ago. I was going through a period of my life. I was actually kind of down during this period. I was going through a little bit of depression, and I noticed that I had stopped saying yes to things. Like as a child, I was always the first one to volunteer. I've never really been shy. And so then I realized that wasn't the case, that I was often saying no to things. And I didn't know which came first, the depression or the saying no to things. And so I decided that was one of the things I was going to be more mindful of. And so I'm still one of the first to volunteer for things now. But there is something that happens where it's like, oh, do you want to go snowboarding? Or, hey, let's go play it in the snow. Like if you don't have a kid that you're doing that with, most adults say no to those things. And I'm so grateful that I have somebody in my life like my husband, because on the off chance I do say no to something like that, he'll push me a little bit more. And every time that I'm actually out there and doing the thing, it feels good. And if it is one of those group things, I tend to be the one that drags my husband to like big like events, random events that are happening in like LA or something like that. And he's the one who drags me to do other things, like especially snow play, because I always think it's going to be too cold. But then when I bundle up and I'm out there, I'm like, this is a blast. And so having those people to even be a little accountability buddy, or looking for your friends that do tend to go out there and say like, hey, next time you go to something, invite me. Because even if it sounds terrible, which often it does, if you lead with your emotions and like you decide the morning of, oftentimes you're going to end up sitting home again. But if you say next Tuesday, I'm going to do this thing and it's on the calendar, you might still feel like you don't want to do it that morning. But if you just push through, I want to guarantee, I guess I can't do that for everyone, but I want to guarantee that once you actually get out there, you'll be like, yes, I'm so glad I showed up for this.
Right. I have a friend I quote in the book, my friend Joanna Miller. She kind of talks about, like, you know, people all around are really throwing out breadcrumbs, right, for connection. And usually, basically, we have this mindset, like I do this too, you know, where you get an email, someone's inviting you to something, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to that. Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, are you kidding me? I'm going to be in bed watching Netflix. Like, oh, you want me to go across town to your brunch on Sunday? Like, no thanks. Or, you know, like, check out this cool poetry thing. Anyone want to go? Lame, right? But those are breadcrumbs. Those are people being like, hey, like this is happening. Or even if it's not people you know, just like you're on a mailing list, or you see something, you know, come across your email, or you know, someone you're on you check out some event, you know, that's people throwing out breadcrumbs to connect. And when you I can understand sometimes saying no, maybe you're busy, you're tired, like that's important to recognize. But if you do it all of the time, those are opportunities to have a great experience and potentially to meet new people and make new friends, and also just enrich your life. So, you know, those are breadcrumbs. And if you can ignore them, but then you're not eating the food, right? You're not being sustained. And I think, you know, as an adult, especially, you know, it's up to us to kind of say, okay, I'm seeing this as a moment of opportunity, of growth, of possibility, right? Especially if it's kind of pushing you outside your comfort zone. Those are some of the best places to make new friends. When someone's like, hey, do you want to go to this thing? And you're like, well, I've never gone to, I don't know, let's say ecstatic dance before, or improv, or a comedy show, or taken a cooking class because you're scared of cooking and you don't want to be embarrassed by cooking dinner for your friends. Like whatever it is, fill in the blank. That's probably a good opportunity to be like, I'm just going to do this, right? I'm going to lean in. I'm going to lean into this comfort. This might be weird. This might be odd. Like that's where the good stuff happens. That's where the growth happens. That's probably where the connection happens.
I will first say that contact or ecstatic dance is one of the best activities ever. When you go, you're most definitely going to be out of your comfort zone. But if you just let loose, oh my gosh, it's like this whole body high. I did an ecstatic dance / contact improv event.
Yeah,
Both
very cool.
were so weird and so fun. I love the weird stuff. I'm reminded of actually 2 baby shower stories that always come up when I'm thinking about connection. So, I mean, I think there's an age where all of a sudden women start liking baby showers more. But in my 20s, I'd get invited to one here and there, and it was like, oh, these are the worst. There's not even wine here. but then I remember one time a friend, we hadn't seen each other in years because we didn't live close together. But then she did come back to LA, and she invited me to her baby shower. And I was planning on going. This was before I had a baby. And I was like, oh, that sounds so fun. But then last minute, I was like, oh, it's an hour away. I don't really feel like it. And I ended up flaking last minute. And I really look at that moment as this, like, for potentially really going deep with this friend versus kind of that friendship falling off. And the friendship ended up falling off. And I've thought back to it because I'm like, if only I would have gone to that baby shower. I feel like it was like that moment of truth. Like, is this a real friendship or is it not? And I sort of proved that maybe it wasn't. And then a few months later, the same thing happened. And I made an effort to go to this baby shower that was far away. I really hadn't seen that friend in a while. And now she's one of my closest friends. And so it's like sometimes when you are going out of your way, showing up to the baby shower that nobody expects you to go to, you end up like that's you choosing friendship or not choosing friendship, whether you realize it or not. You might think it's just this event, but like you said, it was a breadcrumb and you didn't follow it. So you're sitting breadless by yourself and wondering why you're so lonely.
Right. And like, you know, I'm not going to hate on people sometimes for missing out on an event. Like, it happens. We've all been there. Like, I've also gone to things where I was like, I wish I'd stayed home. I was wearing sweatpants. I was so cozy. I was watching a great show, and now I'm 45 minutes, you know, away, and like, this sucks, and this person's been annoying, and the music's no good, and the lighting's bad here, or whatever. But I guess it's just more of that intention of, hey, I'm going to see that these are breadcrumbs and see that people are actually oftentimes inviting you to things. They're giving you these invitations, and you should say yes to some of them.
How much of friendship, finding those close friends that are right for you, how much do you think is required of really knowing yourself and what you want in a friend versus the friendship actually helping you to know yourself and understanding what you want in a friend? Does that make sense at all? How much do you think is required of really knowing yourself and what you want in a friend versus the friendship actually helping you to know yourself and understanding what you want in a friend? Does that make sense at all?
That's a great question. I mean, I think it's both. I think obviously any kind of, you know, it's hard to connect with others without connecting with yourself first, right? If you don't know what you're looking for, if you don't know who you are and what you want, and what's really present for you and what stage you're at in life and kind of, you know, what meaning means to you and what you want, who you want what you want to surround yourself with, it's kind of, I think, probably pretty hard to have deep connections because you're not really going to be able to let people in if you don't know what you want. But I think that friendship is about growth, and a real friendship, I would say, actually, that might be a test of a true friendship, is that you're contributing and invested in each other's growth. So it's a little bit of like you're letting the person in and they're making you better. They're calling you out, you know, if you make a mistake, or they're guiding you, or they're saying, hey, yeah, you should probably quit that job. Like, you've been miserable and depressed for 6 months, or, hey, this relationship might not be serving you, or, hey, I'm going to call you out because every time you get into a relationship and it's hard, you quit, or you try to leave, or you try to break up with somebody. Maybe you should stay, maybe you should do the work, or maybe you should see a therapist, or maybe whatever. Like, that's what a good friend does. They kind of push you towards the best version of yourself. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think you kind of have to start with you, right? That's who's, you know, it's all starts with you. And you have to be willing to let that growth happen. And you also have to show up for someone else. That's the big thing, right? Everyone talks all the time about self-care, self-care, self-care. It's important, right? Not gonna hate on self-care. Like, Given the past 2 years, we all need a lot more self-care in our lives, let's be honest, right? And what about friend care, community care, showing up for others? That's actually what's going to make you happier, right? Doing things for other people. It's true. As much as doing stuff for yourself feels good, it does. It doesn't feel nearly as good as doing something for a loved one, for someone, a family member, for a friend, for a stranger even, showing up for other people. So if you're not willing to do that, your friendships, I think, are going to be not that evolved.
You had a story in your book, I think your friend's name was Bailey, that said, when it came time to be held in my pain, my relationships weren't reciprocal. And there was just something about that line that really hit home to a previous time in my life. I remember in my 20s, I was on this sort of transition from when I was in the midst of like my life being almost not a shit show, but still sort of. I was like on the self-growth path, but it was really early and I was still definitely partying and doing a lot of party drugs, but I was at least seeking healthier ways of life. And I seemingly had all of these friends because I was very active in like looking for events to go to and doing yoga teacher training and just living it up in LA. And so I thought I had a ton of friends. I was getting text messages all the time. And then all of a sudden I was going through a hard time and I started to kind of shoot out those breadcrumbs of like asking for help though, like starting to say like, I'm not really feeling like going out. I'd love for you to just come over. I could use someone to talk to, stuff like that. And then getting totally blown off. And I remember one time just being on the floor in my room, like crying like a toddler, just being super lonely and not knowing who to reach out to and like really having this realization that none of the friends that I had were really true friends. I could always find something to do, but I didn't really have any true friends. And so I sat on that feeling for a while. And at first I was sort of in victim mode. I was like, I don't have any friends. Like I would definitely go to somebody's house if they were reaching out for help like this. But then I thought about it and I realized, when have I? Maybe no one's asked me, but most of the time there are more subtle cues. Am I even picking up on those cues or am I just seeing who will come do what I want, And so the next few years really became me focusing on being the best friend that I could to people and really trying to not have as many expectations back because I didn't want to be hurt. But over time, and I think at first that ended up being me showing up for a lot of friends who still weren't there for me. But over time, I sort of naturally found a different set of people. Like you start to be, when you show up for other people, you start to see who will be there for you back. But if you start out like I did, where it was more like just neediness, I don't think a lot of people know how to react, especially if that's not the type of friend that you've been in the past.
Right. And I think like what's really inspiring about that is that you really kind of said, you were really kind of looking for you were almost building a new life and a new lifestyle. And I think this is very common, among people necessarily maybe who, as you were talking about, stop drinking or stop partying as much or move to a city from a rural place or move somewhere rural after living in a city. Like your lifestyle and your how you want to live changes. If how you want to live and how you want to take care of yourself is changing, not all, but probably some of your friendships are going to change. And to actually be in that space and be in that transition takes a lot of courage. And there's a little bit, I would be surprised if there's not a lull before you kind of get to a better place, right? You kind of have to go down a little bit almost because you're building back up and you're really almost restarting, you're rebooting, you're reimagining. And I think that that's really inspiring because what you are doing there is kind of saying like, hey, this is okay. In order to kind of reinvent yourself a little bit or reinvent your friendships, you almost need to have a little bit. It's like not a straight line, right? It's not like A to B. It's a little bit like A to F, back to C, then get to Z, right? So it's like, that's okay. And normalizing that a little bit and giving people permission that it's a little bit messy and that's okay. And Bailey in that chapter talks a little bit about self-compassion, which I think is part of this, is just kind of like, hey, you're putting out something else, it might not happen right away. A little bit of the patience piece, right? I think like knowing that, hey, like this isn't just going to like snap your fingers, change overnight. Like there's going to be a little bit of a back and forth, and that's good. And that's kind of where the growth, that's the growth happening, right? That's you being like, no, like I'm committed to this new path, this new way of being, this new way of living. And it's not going to happen right away that I'm going to be able to kind of, change my relationships overnight.
That is a really difficult piece of the puzzle for me because I have such a hard time with small talk. So I like go in, I'm like, all right, what's your deepest, darkest secret? Like what's the worst thing you've ever done? Let's go deep. I'm not going to judge. Like that's how I want to start my very first conversation with people. But usually, I mean, you have a whole section in your book about investing in friendship. And I think that's so important because that starting slow can sometimes for me feel like it's not working. Like, because some of my best friends when I was in my 20s, it was like we met and immediately became best friends. But here's the thing. If you're like doing drugs in the bathroom of a Hollywood Hills party all night long, by the end, you're kind of going to feel like you're best friends with that person. Versus
Maybe,
having, well, it depends, either that or,
or you're going to be past that on the side of a road.
Yeah, one of those things. But versus like the end of a 1 hour coffee date,
Right.
just
I
like the bearer of your soul is a little bit different. So what's your process for that? Like, say you just met somebody new and this could be the one that that might come to your birthday party this year. Right. What's your process?
It's a great point. I think first of all, there's I really tried with this book. I really think of it as like a cookbook for friendship. Like it's full of many recipes. Not all recipes are the right recipe for you, or that the right recipe that you want to cook tonight, if that makes sense, right? You think of a cookbook. Sometimes you're in the mood for pasta. Sometimes you're like, oh my God, carbs, no way. Like I'm having only a salad, right? So like you get to choose your own adventure a little bit. So I think in terms of that, I think it's about kind of gradually building the vulnerability. So yes, I think leading with awesome questions is great. But if you just immediately go into like, hey, tell me, I've never met you before, like I love your shoes. Also like, tell me about someone who's died in your life that you care about. You're like, whoa, like Jesus, like take it easy. Like, who are you? What's your name again? So like, I'm not saying you got to go with small talk, but like there is a level of vulnerability that you can kind of slowly introduce so that you're not going to scare someone off. And also like friendships need a little bit of space to grow. So in the same way, if you think about dating, right? Like on the first date, you're probably not going to be like, I have the whole day planned. 10 a.m. we're meeting here for brunch. Then we're going here at noon. Then we're going here at 3 o'clock. Then we got a movie. Then we got date. Then we got drinks. Like, whoa, it's the first date, right? Like, let's space it out a little bit. Slow down, right? Like no one's going home with anyone. No one's kissing. Like it's the first date, right? So there's a little bit of that, I think, with friendship where it's kind of like start small and then kind of invite someone to dinner or, an event that you want to go to and kind of go from there. And I think also, like letting someone know that you're interested in being friends with them is cool. Like, maybe not within the first 10 minutes of meeting them, but like after a couple hangs to be like, hey, like I'm really enjoying, becoming friends with you. And I just wanted to let you know so you don't think like this is just another like random connection. That's cool. But it's just a lot about like kind of creating a little bit of space.
Yeah, I'm normally like, hey, it's been like 12 minutes, but I can already tell we're pretty much best friends. Or like I'll be like way too deep in conversation. My husband will come. He's like, you just met that person 11 minutes ago and you're already talking about this. And so he always comes and does the disclaimer. She's a podcast host. She has questions for a living. So if she makes you uncomfortable, just like do the hand signal.
Right. And also like there's probably going to be someone where you can tell by their body language or kind of how they're in the conversation. If they're on that level, awesome, proceed. Right. If they're kind of like what are you doing? Like, who are you? Like, you can slow down a little bit. Right. Like you can kind of read the situation.
What are some of your tips of kind of going to that deeper level of friendship rather than more wide surface area?
I think ritual is really important. So getting things that are on the calendar repeating, right? So whether it's, a monthly book club or a girls' weekend that you do, you go hang out with your lady friends, or a boys' weekend, you do it once a year, twice a year, go hiking, go to, a spa, go wherever you want to go with the same group of people. That creates something on the calendar that you're looking forward to. It creates these kind of memories. Oh, remember last year when this happened, or this person did this silly thing, right? So you're always kind of having something to look forward to. It makes it kind of less like something that happened one-off and more something repeating. I think is really important. Creating kind of spaces that are like where time disappears. Right. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of like the hour coffee date, or fitting something in between a meeting, or before you're picking up the kids from daycare, or before a work thing, is really hard to go deep. Now, I get it. We're all busy. We've all got a lot going on. We're juggling multiple things. But creating that space where you're kind of clearing the calendar, on a Saturday, on a Sunday, on a Friday evening, or whenever's best for you, where you're like, I have no other plans. Nothing is after this. I'm not fitting it in. I'm not going to another event, or I don't have another dinner meeting or or phone call after this. Like, this is just time with this person. Creates a lot more space, I think, to get a deeper connection.
I love that. The ritual, the kind of having something on a calendar. It's funny because I just started thinking about this because it became really easy to actually do that for Zoom calls. In the last few years, it's like, oh yeah, now this is the old college friends Zoom call, the first Monday of the month at 12, right. But it's like, why didn't we do that in person? And now, like, you are right. When you go through a lot of life changes, I know a lot of my friends who have become moms recently, or if you do something like giving up drinking, like those things that are like stark lifestyle changes, it is sort of like starting from scratch. And so I have met a few amazing people up in my new smaller mountain town, but it's small. So there's not as much going on as like in LA, where I could be like, well, there's this event that's always going on, so let's do this together once a month. Whereas now here, I'm like, I have to create the event. It doesn't have to be something big. It's like, let's do a stroller walk every Monday or whatever it is. So
does that kind of clearing kind of feel empowering? Does that feel refreshing to you?
It does. Honestly, when I was younger, I thought that like being spontaneous, spur of the moment, flying by the seat of my pants was amazing until I realized how much it wasn't. When I really started getting a calendar and not being flaky, because I used to be the biggest flake, because if something better came up, I was going to go to it. And so it was like, I was queen of the non-committal commitment. Like, oh yeah, we'll see how things are. And then they're like text messaging me up until the date. Are we still on for this? I think so. Let me see. And then the morning of, not so much. And now it's like, if we make a plan for 7 weeks from now and I put it in my calendar, it is in my calendar, and that is what I'm doing. There's no backing down from it. And I will say, I am so much happier this way than the other way. It's like, I know what to count on. I know who to count on. I know that people can count on me. And I think that's the biggest part of it, is less about the other stuff. It's that it feels really good to be somebody that people can count on in whatever capacity. It feels good to be the person that they open up to when something's going wrong, or they know that you're going to show up with soup or something if they need it. Like, I'm really excited for my friends to have babies, because I know how difficult that first few months of being a mom was. And there were people that showed me how to be a friend in that transition. And like, I had friends that sent me food or brought over home cooked meals, like those types of things. So I'm like waiting for my friends to get sick or something, just so I can show up for them.
Yeah, exactly. I think what you're talking about is, like figuring out what it looks like, learning what it looks like to show up for other people, especially when they kind of need it the most. I mean, I think, dropping off food or cooking a meal, or even frankly in the current mode we live in of deliver, where you can order food and deliver it. Like, no one doesn't love getting food. Like, no one is not stoked when especially if you have young kids, but anyone, oh my God, I don't have to cook a meal. Like, oh my God, there's food here. like you will make someone's day. Even if it's just like a one dish, right? Or a dessert or whatever, a snack, like they're going to be stoked. You know, like anyone right now with the kind of technology we have can literally press like 3 buttons and order their friend's favorite meal from their favorite restaurant. Like do that, you know, like that's $20 or whatever really worth. Like that's a good investment. Like that is going to feel amazing. You're going to make your friend's day. I don't think we do that kind of stuff enough, especially when, you know, oftentimes people are like, hey, can I do anything? And people are like, no, it's you know, like just send the food, just do it.
I have actually started keeping a note on my phone of the people that are close to me in my life. And if they mention something that they love that's kind of unique, or a food type that they love or whatever, I just kind of write it down, because it makes it really easy for when there's a gift coming up. It's like, oh, this person mentioned they are obsessed with this brand of leggings, or like whatever it is, or this type of food. And when you show up with that thing where they don't know that you even know about it, you just happen to take a little note, it is made some of my friendships close in just that one friend move. And it reminds me of, you told this story that I really loved in your book about being a hype person. And the whole concept is just about, we always talk about like treat a friend like you want to be treated, but instead treat yourself and others as your best self. That was one of my best self moves.
Exactly. Yes. It's like, that's how you want to be treated. It's like someone's just like, yo, I have your favorite bagels. Like, or I have like, you know, this like a shirt of like your favorite, I got a t-shirt of your favorite musician from their most recent tour, or like whatever. And it's just like, whoa, so cool. Like,
right. And it's not even about the
your
thing.
Favorite kombucha. Like, you're just like, it doesn't matter. It's the thought. It's like, holy, like you were listening, you were paying attention, or you give a shit about me, you care about me. It's like a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's like you were listening when I didn't think you were. Like so intently that you wrote that shit down. So I love that. And thank you for all of your focus on this particular topic. I know that it's always helpful for me. I've gone through so many phases of like, okay, I need to connect more. What are the tips for this? And I've read a number of different books on it. But every time I'm in that refresh mode, it's my heart and mind and body telling me like, okay, it's time to put yourself out there. You know, it's time to go out and go on some friend dates. So thank you for everything that you've put into this book, and for all of the wisdom that you've shared. And for listeners that are interested in learning more about you and your book, where's the best place for them to connect?
Yeah, so you can check out Friendship in the Age of Loneliness. You can buy it wherever you buy books. You can follow me and sign up for my newsletter on my website, smileyposwolsky.com. Or follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I'm at What's Up Smiley.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/219. Your challenge for this week is to either reach out to an old friend or get a little bold and try to make a new one. Whether you go to a coffee shop or you go to the park or some event happening near you, do something where you create or you strengthen a current connection. I love this challenge. For some reason, when I think about making the effort to reach out to somebody or to go somewhere to try to make a new friend, it always feels daunting. But when I actually do it, I feel so great about myself, about life, about that connection, about the possibilities. And I know sometimes it can be discouraging in those beginning phases of a new friendship because there's small talk or the weather, or you don't know if you vibe yet. But it's funny, when I was younger and I was going to a party and having a new conversation with a potential new friend, it was a whole different feeling, like endless possibilities. And yes, that could have totally been the MDMA I was on at the time. But I'd like to think that there was something more to that. Just kidding, while also being totally serious. But there's something with that where we get in our own heads and we convince ourselves that something might not be good for us when we know deep down that it is. A few years ago, I was doing a 30-day mindset challenge and people loved it. Well, one of the challenges in there was all about connection, and people reached out to somebody from their past that was meaningful to them. And that was the exercise that actually got people the most fired up. People reached out and they were so thankful that I had push them to do that. Some of those friendships ended up re-bonding, re-becoming a close friendship. Other ones was just making somebody feel good because you're telling them that they meant something to you. And that always feels good. So I challenge you to do one of those two things. Reach out to an old friend or go somewhere and put yourself out there for the opportunity to potentially meet a new friend. And let me know how it goes. Reach out to me at mindlovemelissa on Instagram or leave a comment right on the show notes page at mindlove.com/219. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is by joining Mind Love Premium at mindlove.com/premium or right there in the podcast app. I do prefer on my website, but I am honestly so thankful either way that you join Premium. I know that within the Apple Podcast app, that can sometimes be more convenient. So whatever works for you. I just love that you're here. Other ways are by supporting my amazing sponsors or by leaving a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.